I don't have guts. And Karthik and you, Mama
No, we
and
don't.
Mama
Yeah.
and what do you call that nephew have guts to start. So I
Yes,
thought I should tag along with you and learn
why it's a
something.
real inspiration. He does a lot of
Inspiration.
reading for us, for Lord Meher,
Hmm.
for David God. I mean,
Yes, yes,
he's got his storehouse of energy.
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah,
Avatar
David
Meher
God
Baba Ki Jai.
was a big
Let's get
jump.
started.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, let's get started. Yeah, it was a big jump. I agree, Sanjay. So on the screen is not yet
Should I bring my
the
Meeting Intelligence book?
three couplets. So who wants to read? Ashok, why don't you read?
Okay.
Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai.
Three of Meher Baba's favorite couplets of Hafiz, a mystical Persian poet, befitting a fortunate slave, carry out every command of the master without any question of why and what. About what you hear from the master, never say it is wrong because, my dear, the fault lies in your own incapacity to understand him. I am slave of the master, release me from ignorance. Whatever my master does is of the highest benefit of all concerned. Hafiz, Avatar, Meher Baba ki Jai.
Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai. Thank you very much. Uh, I think you set the tone, Ravi. It's not an easy journey that we have embarked on, and we sure need Baba's full grace and support. And I think all the people in the Baba world that I've spoken to have a similar reaction to what you said, which is, "Hey, are you really doing infinite intelligence?" I said, "Yes." So let's see what happens, huh? Let's, as you said, Baba courage. So on that note, so where we are, as I was telling you on the message earlier this morning, where we are is we started with series one. The book is divided into two parts. The first part has multiple chapters. They call it series because within the notebook there's multiple sections of thematic expression. Then there are two books in all, as I said. So we started with series one after reading the front matter of the book, which is we started from the website and then went to the front matter and then went to series one. After series one, we realized that there were multiple references to essay, and the essay is contextual for a reader, especially a reader who is conversant or at least has read God Speaks before. So we felt that it was better to read that and then continue our journey. So we did about 3-4 pages of that essay. So this is the essay that you can see, right? So we did a few pages of that essay. It's very important context. This video is not out yet. I'll put that video out. Please catch up with that because it's important context, especially on the use of words. Words like what does subtle world mean in this book? What does fine mean in this book? Right? And the excessive importance to the word thinking as separate from intelligence and so on, right? So a lot of things that we need to get our skin, I mean, get under the skin of and understand at detail, right? So we stopped yesterday here. That is, if you're following the physical book, it's 468, and we're starting from the structure of individuality. Any thoughts, questions before we start?
No questions.
No.
No.
Okay. Any volunteers for reading?
Not today. Mm.
I take that as a no, so I'll continue then. The structure of individuality. Requesting muting of mics. The structure of individuality. All individuality derives from the infinite intelligence. Figures 1, 2, 7, and 8 in pages 4, 8, 80, and 81 illustrate levels of derivation involved here. Infinite intelligence gives rise to the universal infinite false I or mind, which in turn produces the individual infinite false I or mind. The individual infinite false I, in turn, manifests as the subtle body, whose consolidated mold takes the form of the gross body. In effect, these four figures, 1, 2, 7, and 8, are flowcharts illustrating how identity descends from the sphere of the real as pure infinite intelligence to the most illusory as gross body. Don't you think it makes sense to probably quickly see those images and come back? So let's do that, right? So it's just somebody help me, 4, 8, 80, 81, okay? So Control G. Figure 1. So this was in series 1. So we remember this, right? And there was a variation of this, which was in 8, if you remember. And if you remember, it's basically the individualization shown here. And there is a universal infinite false I, apart from the individual false I. And then all of that is contained in infinite intelligence as described by the circle, the blue circle, right? So again, the key is infinite intelligence in the pure unconscious beyond state. That's the blue circle, the whole thing. Gold is one universal infinite false I, innumerable individual infinite false I's, and then the circles are the subtle form. The squigglies with the inverted, I mean, the squigglies at the bottom are the gross form. You'll see a variation of this in 8. I mean, an extension of this, I would say. So this is 8, I think, right? Figure 2, yes. So here, this is called derivation of individual drops from the intelligence ocean, right? So here he uses specific names, but basically it's continuing the theme of individualization. And the perfect subtle form of an individual infinite false I. That is the round circle. That is subtle body of a human. And there is also greater emphasis on the fact that with the perfect gross form and the subtle form, there is an individuality that gets defined here because there is a light blue circle that's formed here, right? But they all are coming from the home point, and they don't have anything, they're not outside the blue circle, and so on and so forth, right? So I think this much we got. And now let's go to figure, was it 40?
Actually, in the last one,
Sure.
the number of souls shown were much less, and because they are also in the blue circle, also highlights or maybe indicates that they are the enlightened souls.
Those are the ones
you
on
see
the
like that.
on
Yeah, because it is saying Vairam,
Named.
Rustam, Padri. Yeah, they are named.
Mandali.
Yeah,
Correct,
how many are
correct,
there? 1,
correct.
2, 3, 4, 5, 12 are there.
Yes, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes, 13.
Yeah,
12,
and
12,
one
you're
woman.
right.
No?
12.
12.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So
Yes.
I think this graph also is indicating that. Yeah. Jai Baba.
And in an act bordering on blasphemy, Sunil actually introduced our names along with the Mandali, but then I just thought I'd point that out. Oh, Sunil dropped off. I thought he came in. Anyway, so let's go to 40, right? Does anybody
Yes,
remember?
40 and then 80, I think.
40, 48, and then 80 or something. Yeah. 40.
40, 80, 81.
That's the accountant. Thank you very much. Hey, but 40 doesn't have a diagram.
I don't know where you got 40, but anyway.
Maybe 48 then. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's 48.
Yeah, figure 5, 48.
I,
No, this is 46. I don't think we'll go there. We'll go to 40. Oh, it's messed up. Anyway, I think it's 46. Let's look at this. Or better still, we will just see what's in that. Okay, it's not showing the notes. Okay, so we are better off going and checking the note and coming back. Okay, so let me do that. So 4, 8, 80, and 81. But I think we are better off remembering the figure numbers 1, 2, 7, 8. Okay, 1, 2, 7, 8 again. So with that, let's go to 80. Okay. 80, right? That's the next one. The Haram,
yes, yes,
Zoroaster.
yes, yes.
Yeah. In
80 and
universal
81.
infinite. Yeah. Universal infinite false mind. Individual infinite real mind. That's the realized soul, right? That has infinite mind and then reaches infinite intelligence. Cross body, subtle body, fine body. Please note, fine body. Individual infinite false mind. Yeah. Any thoughts on what to make of this? I think this is explained when we read this this series anyway. So I'll not worry about.
Yeah, Karthik, I just thought we'll keep it somewhere. Question: what is fine body? We've
You
we've heard.
missed yesterday's class. So fine, yeah. So fine is a reference to. Please correct me if I'm wrong. The others who were on the call yesterday. Fine is a reference to anything that's in a state of potentiality or subtlety. So it's the most ungross form, right? And it's a terminology that Baba has not used later, right? So again, for those of you joining first time, 1920s is when this book was written. 1950s is when God Speaks was written. And yesterday we learned the reference to this word fine has not actually appeared elsewhere at all, right? This fine body or fine is not an expression that Baba has used subsequently at all. But for the purposes of this book, when you see fine, all you need to remember is it's the most unexpressive or unmanifested form of a sanskara, of a body, of so on, right? Anybody wants to add to that explanation?
So could we say that it is beyond plane 6 or 7 or beyond?
No. It's the most unexpressed one. So
unexpressed one.
it's the other direction. It's closer to unconsciousness, but it's little more than that because it already has individualization.
This
So
is
it is the, we can take it as it is the peak of the mind, say, again, subtle and then mental. So it is the topmost point of the mental.
oh,
So here in this reference, when Baba refers to subtle, it is a combination of both what we read as subtle and mental in
And mental.
God Speaks.
Oh.
So fine is topmost, or the
I
peak
don't
of
agree
that.
with the topmost. I don't agree with the topmost. I
Okay.
think it's on the bottommost. But I would I would request everybody to go back to yesterday's class, and then we can confirm. If I find something, I'll post a note as well, just for
Yeah,
everybody.
I did listen to around 45, 50 minutes of the class, and then I had to
No,
attend
no,
this
no, no,
class.
no, no. This
No,
was 2 weeks back.
yesterday's class.
Yesterday's is not even posted. Sorry.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry.
Yesterday's is not even posted. So let me
Well,
post that, and anyway, you can see it online once I've posted. I also will bring out that clarity. But good question. Stay with that question and stay with that doubt till you get clarity
yeah.
on
When
the
we read,
video
maybe
and
it will
message.
become clear. When you read, it become clear. And my apologies because I've missed a couple of sessions.
Okay, so this is 80, gentlemen. So this was 80 and this was 81. So we kind of messed it up, but that's okay. So 7 is structure and descent of individuality, right? So the topmost is the so it's descent. So we are supposed to read it top down, I presume. So you have infinite intelligence on the top, then you have infinite mind, then you have universal infinite false mind, which again, all the time we hear this, it's about all of us, or at least me. Okay, so that's our state. Then you go down, individual infinite false minds, subtle bodies, gross bodies. So again, you see why I think, Mama, it's on the first step. So you see fine, then subtle, and then gross. So it's the expression that becomes most gross in gross, but the most potential state or potentiality state is in the fine state, and not to be confused with post mental or near mental, is my humble understanding. But let's park it till we see it, till we read it again. All right. Okay. So
Okay. This universal infinite false mind, there is a dot, that is the starting point, or who am I?
home point. Home point.
Okay.
Home
Okay.
point, Ahur point. Yeah, I think so. Good catch. Thank you. Yeah, so with that, I think we can go back to where we were.
480.
480, right? Yeah, so the
No,
pages
87.
don't match the, yeah. Yeah. So we saw 1, 2, 7, and 8. 1 second. Get rid of this. Stop. Okay, so that's figures 1, 2, 7, and 8. We kind of sort of understand that, except a little bit of a confusion around fine. Okay, so is that fine, gentlemen? Gentlemen and my lady, Meher Nom. Meher Nom, by the way, is Namita. Yeah, okay. So let's continue from that point. In effect, these 4 figures, 1, 2, 7, and 8, are flowcharts illustrating how identity descends from the sphere of the real as pure infinite intelligence to the most illusory as gross body. The human individual contains within himself this entire lineage from top to bottom. Like a drop from the ocean, the individual derives from the whole. But just as the drop actually is the ocean, so the individual is ultimately no one other than the totality, the infinite intelligence. Again, like we saw in the book Nothing and Everything by Bhau, references to infinite intelligence together, the term infinite intelligence, can be taken to represent divinity or godhood, right? In a loosely defined manner. That's what we learned also in the essay in the earlier page, right? Okay, let's continue. In the line of derivation depicted in the four figures, a critical relationship lies between the universal infinite false I and the individual infinite false I. The universal infinite false I, also called the universal infinite false mind or false egoism or false thinking, is the real I or self when projected upon the nothingness of illusion. It's an important point being made out here. I'll read this line again. In the line of derivation depicted in the four figures, a critical relationship lies between the universal infinite false I and the individual infinite false I. The universal infinite false I, also called the infinite false mind or false egoism or false thinking, is the real I or self when projected upon the nothingness of illusion. I pause. Any thoughts? Any questions?
No, here the real I or self. So is it the smallest self that we feel, the ego or the selfness that we have? False ego or false thinking is the real I or self when projected upon nothingness of illusion. So it is the actual real I, but projected upon the nothingness of illusion, creating a false I. Probably.
It's false
Correct.
I, Mamaji. It's false I.
False I.
It
I
is
am
false
Ravi,
I, yeah.
I am Dattu Sri Raman. It's that.
Yes, yes.
Okay, let's continue then. Singular in itself, the universal infinite false I is the source of innumerable individual infinite false I's, or false minds, or false egoisms, or false thinkings. The individual infinite false I's are human individualities who stand at the apex of evolution. Subhuman forms, such as plants or animals, are individual finite false I's. The relationship between the individual and the universal is fundamental and pervades creation on all levels. Illusion as a whole, for example, has gross, subtle, and fine worlds or universes. Similarly, the individual has gross, subtle, and fine forms or bodies. The subtle and gross universes are the bodies of what Meher Baba calls the imagination, while the subtle and gross forms of the individual are the bodies of the individual thinking. This we learned yesterday. The difference between imagination and thinking. The subtle and gross universes are the bodies of what Meher Baba calls the imagination, while the subtle and gross forms of the individual are the bodies of the individual thinking. Thus, the universal and individual mirror each other on their respective levels, and at the same time, the universal stands at the head of the lineage or chain of descent by which the individual comes into apparent being, because it's not real. Right? So there is a diagram here. Probably get it. So infinite intelligence, intelligence thinking falsely, I would imagine it's infinite intelligence thinking falsely, and universal infinite. I mean, that results in universal infinite false mind. Gross bodies of the individual. These are all the names again. The body of infinite false mind. Detail of diagram from notebook 1, folio 5, showing the derivation of individuals from infinite intelligence. Right. So the false I is the mind. The false I is the mind. Second, I'm trying to get rid of this. Why is it not going off? Okay. The false I is the mind, and the mind carries a somewhat different connotation in this text than it does elsewhere in Meher Baba's writings. God Speaks, Discourses, and other books and messages emphasize that the individual mind has to become annihilated before the soul can become one with God. Indeed, a critical phase in Meher Baba's own life work bore the name Mano Nash, which means annihilation of the mind. Infinite intelligence, however, does not talk about the mind's annihilation. To the contrary, the infinite mind appears to be an enduring constituent of individuality up to and through self-realization. How to reconcile these apparently contradictory views on the perishability of the mind? Actually, as we saw in the discussion of the subtle earlier, the main problem here is semantic. I pause here and underline this fact, because in what you missed yesterday, most of the confusion goes away between this book and God Speaks if you're able to respect that they are written in two different times, and Baba was still formulating the semantics of his cosmology, right? So in this book, there will be references to fine, subtle in different ways. There will be references in this book that's different for the use of the word mind, but we'll have to tolerate, indulge, and imagine this time warp, this time difference, and appreciate and enjoy this book. So please bear that in mind. So the phrase,
Yeah. Actually, you have been talking of this since we started this book, but I think this book is like a manuscript, that was given, and it was not intended by Baba to be printed in a book form. And they were like messages given, and people wrote it down, and this has now come as a book. What he wanted to finally, wanted his lovers to finally rely on is only God Speaks, which he has even recommended that everybody must read. So with that in mind, we must read this. Yes. But these are like, kacha work, we can say, the rough work before the final product came out. Yeah.
Good point. So Baba, if he wanted importance to this book and he wanted us to read, he would have put it at the level of God Speaks, because the amount of importance Baba has given for others for Baba lovers to read God Speaks, he has obviously not accorded to this. So this is a result of a lot of work, discovery first of the manuscript, and then editing, and then bringing this out. And we guys who are intellectually stimulated and excited about this book are reading it. But yes. Sanjay set the perfect context. Sanjay set the perfect context. Don't get carried away. God Speaks is still the final word.
Yes. This for those who want to deep dive. How did the God Speaks came about? Crazy ones.
Yeah. Okay. So let's continue. The phrase infinite mind gets used in this text in several distinct ways to mean infinite intelligence in the thinking state, to designate the mind of the ordinary human, to refer to the universal infinite false mind, to denominate Ishwar, and to signify the real mind or the thinking self. So when you say infinite mind, it says 5 different things. Infinite intelligence in thinking state, designation of the mind of the ordinary human, that is also infinite mind, to refer to the universal infinite false mind, which is the big false mind, to denominate Ishwar, which is creator, preserver, dissolver, and to signify the real mind or the thinking self, biggest self. All of them could be referred to when you say infinite mind. Beware. When the human becomes God realized, the infinite false mind becomes real. For this transformation to occur, some kind of destruction clearly must take place. The text discusses the wiping out of sanskaras and not the wiping out of mind. Yet, when sanskaras disappear from the stage, the activity of the mind completely stops. This stopping of the mind, in which all false thinking ceases, is another name for the annihilation of the mind found so often in Meher Baba's later writings. At this juncture begins the real thinking, which is self-thinking, where self is what thinking thinks, where big self is what thinking thinks. This real thinking of the stopped mind takes the place of the false thinking that the false mind engaged in previously, in which thinking thinks the creation. In effect, then, thinking becomes thinking with the big T, and mind becomes the big M mind. This same relationship between a false entity and a real entity, both designated through the same word, will already be familiar to students of Meher Baba's later writings in the case of the term self. While the limited self, S small, is rooted in and ultimately identical with the real biggest self or God, that limited self must in some sense be destroyed before one can experience the real big S self. Right? Returning to the chain of descent from infinite intelligence to the gross body, this hierarchy of being in the deviation of individuality appears to mirror
derivation.
Derivation, sorry, not deviation. Returning to the chain of descent from infinite intelligence to the gross body, this hierarchy of being in the derivation of individuality appears to mirror the hierarchy of light that Baba describes in God's hand and in the sections of the treatise Sadguru and the Light of Intelligence based upon it. On page 18 of his handwritten manuscript, Baba illustrates the following. On the top level, natural light, which is called the real I. Below this, the natural darkness, which is the false unlimited I. Below this, the unnatural darkness, which is the false limited I. And on the bottom, the unnatural light, which is the body and universe. It appears that natural darkness, which in Sadguru and the light of intelligence is characterized as the fine imagination and nothingness, is, or perhaps is, the locus of the universal infinite false I. Possibly, this universal infinite false I is equivalent to the infinite mind or Ishwar, though the text does not explicitly make this identification. So this is a reference to a text in God's hand, right? The manuscript, which is recreated facsimile in a book. The unnatural darkness, on the other hand, appears to refer to what infinite intelligence calls the infinite mind of the individual human. In God's hand, uses the term false I limited in the domain of the finite. But at several points in that manuscript, Baba applies the epithet limited to the human mind, which infinite intelligence calls infinite. In short, the categories of light and darkness, which reside at the core of Meher Baba's handwritten manuscript and have been the subject of much interest, clearly relate to the derivation, and descent of individuality from infinite intelligence, as explained on the first folio and many other places in intelligence notebooks. By the way, intelligence notebooks are two. There are two books. There are two notebooks that they discovered. Okay, so that closes out the first part. Next, they're talking about thinking and as creating and realizing. So a portion of thinking is what creates the imagination, which creates everything for us. And the second part of the thinking, the real thinking, is where you do the realizing and make progress to discover your true nature, right? So that's what is the subheading suggesting: thinking as creating and thinking as realizing, right? Let's go there. One second.
Hey, Karthik, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Where do you get this document from?
You're not supposed to ask that question.
Okay.
So, no. So this is a work in progress. We are getting permission to be able to show this, but this is actually the physical book. This is from the physical book. Yeah.
The physical book doesn't say
That's-
that. 498 page doesn't say this.
No, you're on the wrong page. So 471, please.
471?
Can you see 471 on the right side? So the front matter of the book is not counted in the pagination.
Okay.
So just stick to 471, please.
Yeah, I'm
Go
in
to
471.
All right,
Yeah.
that's thinking as creating and realizing. Yeah.
It's not there. Oh, yeah. It is there.
Okay.
So you read
right,
all
thank
the
you.
other pages so far?
No. So like I told you on the text in the morning, we are actually reading an essay which builds the context for the rest of the book. This should actually be in the front of the book, is what we were thinking yesterday. So this is setting the context for the series.
So
for
are
the
you going
two
to
books.
start the reading the actual book?
After this, yeah.
Okay, got it.
All right. Thinking as creating and realizing. The fundamental modality through which infinite intelligence acts in creation is thinking. The fundamental modality through which infinite intelligence acts in creation is thinking. As already noted, the word thinking in infinite intelligence encompasses consciousness in all its aspects. This we covered yesterday. Thinking, feeling, willing, desiring, and so forth. All of that is covered in the word thinking when we read it in this book. Actually, thinking in this text carries several distinct and sometimes surprising meanings. Baba often refers to a mind or individuality as a thinking. Although this usage is eccentric and slightly jolting in modern English, the editors have retained it, since it expresses as no other locution could how thinking itself constitutes mind and individuality. Right? So just keep that in mind. A thinking means a mind. Infinite intelligence devotes many passages and sections to explications of thinking and enumeration of the categories thereof. Perhaps the most critical distinction in this respect, a distinction at the very heart and center of infinite intelligence, is between thinking as creating and thinking as realizing. Neither in God Speaks nor elsewhere in Meher Baba's published writings has he set forth this idea so fully. It is original to this text and it plays a key role in the larger esoteric metaphysical enterprise that this book engages in. In the specialized terminology of infinite intelligence, what do creating and realizing mean? To think in the sense of create means to produce or project forth the imagination, whereas to think in the sense of realize means to become and experience what thinking as imagination has imagined. The creation process, in other words, entails the unrolling of the entire subtle and gross universes with all their multifarious forms in imagination only. This creation in imagination occurs instantaneously, all in a single moment. Yet it does not result in what we as ordinary human beings would call an actually existing world. The actualization of what has been imagined occurs through the process of thinking as realizing. That is, infinite intelligence as an individualized thinking realizes, becomes, and experiences some particular form in the creation. The process of realization occurs slowly, bit by bit, starting from the most finite and proceeding to the infinite. Thus, the entire architecture of creation comes into being imaginatively in a single moment, but the actualization and experience, that is, realization of this architecture, comes to pass through a long process of evolution in which the infinite intelligence thinks, but at this time he's realizing its way through the series of forms up to the human. So, clear? So the thinking as imagination is somewhat instantaneous. Thinking as realization is the journey, is the individual associating himself with imagination and experiencing those different forms is the process of realizing, as far as this book is concerned. Right? The analogy of architecture could be helpful in illuminating these relations between thinking as creating and thinking as realizing. An architect, in designing a building, projects and imagines that building in all its details: size, shape, number of rooms, building materials, electrical connections, lighting, plumbing, heating and cooling, ventilation, etc. But even after the architect's design work is 100% complete, the building still could not be used. The architect's imaginary roof could not keep the rain off of one's head. A flesh and blood human could not climb the architect's imaginary staircase to look out from the imaginary balcony on the imaginary second floor. All of this becomes possible only after the architect's plans have been actualized, made real. While a master architect might be capable of holding the entire building design in his head all at the same time, the actual construction of the building would take many months or even years and might entail the labors of many tradesmen of different types working with a variety of materials. In the same way, infinite intelligence as creator projects the infinite edifice of creation, but only when the intelligence as individual thinking realizes this creation does creation come into actual existence in the ordinary worldly sense. Good analogy. What do you guys think? Architect planning is thinking as imagination. The building actually coming up is realization. Again, I reiterate, this is thinking as imagination and thinking as realization as far as this book is concerned. The term which the text gives to infinite intelligence in its role of creator architect is Ishwar, a common name for God in Hindu tradition, which Shankaracharya used to designate the Sagun or attributeful personalized aspect of Nirgun Brahman, God without attributes. I don't understand this. Let me read this again. A common name for God in Hindu tradition, which Shankaracharya used to designate the Sagun, which is personalized aspect of Nirgun Brahman, God without attributes. I don't agree with that. So Shankaracharya, when he said Ishwar, it was both Sagun and Nirgun. It's not It's not to designate the Sagun alone. Shiva is probably Shagun, but Ishvara is both Shagun and Nirgun, right? Hindu experts? Anybody?
I am not very clear on this. Paramatma, Ishwar is the lineage. So in that sense, this is correct.
Yeah, it's correct from a Baba standpoint, but he drags Shankaracharya, or the editors are dragging Shankaracharya. If they are, when he uses Ishvara is Sagun and Nirgun. It's basically the all-pervading divine is Ishvara in his reference. Anyway, I'm not the expert, but I don't agree with the fact that it's only Sagun. Okay, anyway, that's minor. Though God speaks does not refer to Ishwar as Ishwar, it does describe that same aspect of God in the chapter on the 10 states of God under state 3, which is the creator, emanator, sustainer, and dissolver. In God Speaks, it is 167 to 170. Those pages constitute a useful background to the present text. Yet, Infinite Intelligence provides much information on this state which does not appear in God Speaks or anywhere else in Meher Baba's writings. There's an asterisk. The role of Ishwar is described, however, in Bhavu Kalchuri's The Nothing and the Everything, pages 210 to 15, which was based on Baba's dictations. Again, this is a book that we read, and this role of Ishwar comes, I think, after the Infinite Intelligence part of that book. If you remember, there's some mic that made a lot. There are many sections and chapters. The chapter on Ishwar is what is being referred to, which is 210 to 215. So this is the second reference to
Ishwar, as I understand, is the unmanifest form of unconscious part of the God.
Karthik, we lost you. No
I'm
audio.
still there.
Yes.
Can you,
Oh,
Okay.
can you hear me?
Did you guys hear me?
Yeah, I heard you.
yes, now
I
we
heard
can
you.
hear
I
you.
heard you.
Yeah.
I heard you, Ravi.
I mean, that's kind of a surprise for me in Nothing and Everything. But Ishwar, what I understand from Nothing and Everything and Avatar Meher Baba manifesting is unmanifest form of unconscious God.
Correct. So it's basically, if you look at Baba's use of the word Ishwar in this book and beyond, including in God Speaks, it's very clearly the not to be confused with Paramatma, but it is to refer to the role of the creator, preserver, destroyer, state 3.
Yeah.
Which is what is said here as well, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So we're on the same page.
We are all experiencing that creation.
Exactly.
And we are all experiencing that creation, sustenance, and destruction.
Correct. So let me continue. Ishwar, as described in Infinite Intelligence, is creator, preserver, destroyer. Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, all in one. The author and creator, that is creator, preserver, destroyer of infinite forms. Ishwar is himself formless, Nirakar, and creates formlessly. All-knowing and all-powerful with respect to the universe, Ishwar does not know himself as infinite intelligence. In terms of the distinction under consideration here between creating the imagination and realizing it, Ishwar is the imaginer supreme. So if you take it in the context of what we learned in the couple of paragraphs before, Ishwar in the Meher Baba ontology is the imaginer supreme. So it's only the architect. He just imagines it. He creates all and realizes in the way we understood in the previous paragraph, nothing. So he creates all and realizes nothing. The realization of imagination is accomplished by infinite intelligence, not as the formless Ishwar, but as the formful Sakar embodied thinking. That's through the foresight.
Sakar. It is Sakar.
Sakar. Perfect. Thank you. Sakar. Sanskrit Sakar. The pair of terms creating and realizing, or more exactly, thinking in the sense of creating and thinking in the sense of realizing, correlate with another important pair: imagination and thinking. The imagination is what thinking as creating produces, and a thinking is the realization of that creation, finitely or infinitely, through a particular individuality. So when I read the title, this is where I got confused. So this brings it out very clearly. Bear with me, I'll read it again. The pair of terms creating and realizing, or more exactly, thinking in the sense of creating and thinking in the sense of realizing, correlate with another important pair: imagination and thinking. The imagination is what thinking as creating produces, which is the architect part. And a thinking is the realization of that creation, finitely or infinitely, through a particular individuality. The word thinking then gets used in two distinct senses: as a general term encompassing creating and realizing as its two aspects, and as a narrower designation for the realizing aspect of thinking only. By contrast, Baba uses the word imagination unambiguously. It always pertains to thinking as creating and never to thinking as realizing. Surprisingly, the word imagination is used consistently throughout the book as a synonym for universe. The universe springs into being when it is imagined. The realization of the universe follows after. Universe as universe is purely imaginary. This point has profound implications that philosophers and scientists will no doubt try to fathom in the future. I think it's a thought exercise worthy of investing time in. I'm still wrapping my head around it. The fact that imagination springs into existence when imagined, but the realization of the universe follows after. Right? So it's a new thought stream that has come to us. So I'm sure we can think more, discuss more in the coming days after we have got enough time to process it.
One point here. So what all we read in say till now in God Speaks and other things. So we always used to stress the point that the whole creation is imaginary, whole creation is false and it's non-existent. But here the second aspect of that is being brought out, that on realization you come to know that it is real, it is existing. But till that time, it is total imagination. So this point has to be understood properly. It has to sink in.
Hold on. I don't
dream in a dream. Yeah, dream in a dream.
That's better, because it's not the realization that it is real. Even after you come to thinking as realizing, it is still false. It's still imaginary. The distinction here is only the fact that one part is the architect, which basically is the dream of God, which creates everything, right? But the other part is through the individual souls that you actually realize all of that. Realize in a different meaning than what I think you said, Mama. I prefer dream of a dream, what Sanjay said. It's just that.
Okay, we will hold it at that point. Okay.
This is what I think. This is what I think. We have mind.
Perceive as
mind
real,
only
but
can
actually,
think of create.
Yeah. Yes.
See, we have mind. We only have mind. We don't have the sense of reality. The mind thinks creation is real. But Baba keeps saying no, this is not real. You are in a false imagination. But he is telling from his point of view. We are yet to experience that state. When we achieve the state, then we think, oh, what all I experienced as Sridhar or Karthik was all imaginary. I am always God. I'm always God. I'm universally God. Same.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
That's
Perfect.
what it is. Yeah.
So the realizing in the way we understood now is not in Baba's way, but it's in our way. So we're first coming to term with our perception of reality, which is dealing with the universe as we know it. But that itself is imaginary is the next stage.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, great. Let me continue. While the themes of thinking and imagining recur throughout infinite intelligence, a particular important treatment occupies the first portion of series 10. As I said, series refers to chapters. In the original, formless, unmoving, unmanifested state, the state that God speaks referred to as beyond, thinking is infinite. Of course, in this state, infinite intelligence is sound asleep and so does not think at all. Thinking has not yet begun, yet it exists nonetheless and has not yet come under the yoke of any limitation. By contrast, imagination at this time is most finite, a point or atom, as it were, in the ocean of infinite thinking. But when thinking begins, immediately this thinking becomes most finite, while the most finite imagination in that same moment becomes infinite. In short, they reverse positions, each assuming a condition contrary to its own nature. Thinking and imagination. Imagination becomes infinite. Imagination, which is inherently nothing, expands ad infinitum, apparently becoming everything. While thinking, which draws on infinite intelligence and partakes of its reality, contracts to the point of greatest finitude, becoming virtually nothing. From this state of supreme finitude, thinking gradually expands and enlarges, divesting itself of its limits until it becomes infinite again, as the infinite mind in human form. This process, involving the crossing lines of thinking and imagination, is illustrated in figure 11, one of the most important figures in the book. We'll quickly take a look at that.
$178.
Figure 11, crossing lines of thinking and imagination. This is a new concept. We've never heard of this finitude and infinitude between thinking and intelligence. So let's see how much we understand of it. So A to E is axis of thinking. Where is A? A to E is the axis of thinking. A through B to C through D to E. Okay. And what is that? A is fine infinite thinking. So again, fine in the potentiality shape or the most finite shape or the most unexpressed form. B, thinking infinite mind, which is Ishwar. C is most finite thinking. That's C here. C dash is stone, vegetable, animal, from most finite to least finite thinking. D is human, infinite thinking. E is infinite real mind. X to Y is the axis of imagination. X to Y is the axis of imagination. And it goes through B. What is B? B is thinking infinite mind. Ishwar. Okay. X, most finite imagination. B is thinking infinite mind, which is Ishwar, as we understood, creator, preserver, destroyer. B dash is from most finite to infinite imagination. Y is equal to infinite imagination. So it's the large imagination. Red equal to gross, yellow equal to subtle. Yellow is subtle, red is gross. Well, there's a lot to unpack here. Anybody wants to jump in and explain this?
Unvibrating, vibrating. Just go up. Okay.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's a full view. Yeah. So I think anyway, the editors are suggesting
Now,
is one of
what
the
is
most
this
important
E?
diagram.
Can you read the explanation for E?
Infinite real mind.
So at the point of infinite real mind, everything is non-existent. These two things are D and Y.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, we'll see the
Infinite
explanation.
Exactly. So I think when we get to figure 11 as part of our reading, we'll get to that anyway. So right now, I would not worry about it, right? Not worry about it, but remember that this is, as expected, an important part of the book.
I attended the What Thoughts class in Chicago 15 years ago, but I can't remember anything. I have to reread everything.
Oh, so he did a session on infinite intelligence?
Yes. He did a lot of sessions
Okay.
in different places.
Okay. So we were here, right? So figure 11. So this is
the same figure here.
Yeah, the original manuscript with the same figure, right? Okay. So another figure here, detailed from notebook 1, folio 16, showing evolution projecting forth from infinite through the Om point. Atom, metal, vegetable, animal form. Again, all the kingdoms are not in the way we understand in God Speaks and later days of Baba, but that's to be there. I mean, just pointing that out so that we. Okay, so let's continue. The beginning of thinking and the interplay of opposites. Originally, imagination existed as a single point in the changeless and unmoving infinite thinking. But when thinking began, when the first vibration took place, infinite imagination was projected out through the Om point. Mic's muted, please. But when thinking began, when the first vibration took place, infinite imagination was projected out through the Om point, also called the Ahur Bindu or Maheshwar point. Series 5 characterizes it as the putli or pupil in the eye of Paramatma. As we have seen, imagination immediately expanded ad infinitum, but at the same time, thinking became infinitely finite. So that's the two contrasts that he talked about. Baba uses the term atom for this most finite first manifestation of thinking. One should not construe this word in the modern scientific sense as referring to a particle comprised of electrons and a nucleus, but rather as designating the first, most finite, most primitive form in the gross series of evolution. Asterisk, and right there is the note. In the 1920s, when the intelligence notebooks were composed, the word atom still carried many of its resonances from the tradition of ancient Greek atomic philosophy, according to which atoms are the irreducible particles from which all things are constituted. The ancient Indian school of philosophy, known as Vaisesika, has a similar view. Of course, Meher Baba's metaphysics holds no truck with the view that the gross universe is composed of irreducible particles. To the contrary, atoms are nothing other than the gross forms of impressions or sanskaras. Yet, Baba's usage of the word atom as the first in a series of evolving gross forms keeps with the philosophical language of that time. Very useful. Even though it expands and proliferates infinitely, the imagination, originally fine and most finite, becomes the limit on the thinking of infinite intelligence. Limit means binding. Limit means finitude. Thus, the interplay between thinking and imagination gives rise to the dichotomy of the infinite and the most finite. Limitation implies a line of demarcation between what is within the limit and what is without. Thus, limitation necessitates form. Originally, thinking was formless, nirakar. But when thinking began, it became informed, sakar, and subject to the binding of form. In short, the beginning of thinking precipitated the emergence of opposites. In each of these pairs of opposites, one term more closely corresponds to the real and the other to the false. In the last analysis, infinite intelligence would more aptly be characterized as infinite than as finite, as formless than any other particular form, But at the very outset, when thinking begins and creation erupts out of the original formlessness, a reversal takes place and this natural order gets stood on its head. The false opposite takes on the appearance of reality, and the real opposite appears to be illusory. Of course, the real cannot truly be real when situated within the domain of opposites. Infinity is not infinite when conceived as the opposite of finite. Formlessness is not formless as long as it remains merely some kind of absence or negation within the world of form. Only when divine union, Vazla, is achieved and the division into opposites vanishes, can the real actually be realized by infinite thinking in its infinite state. Hedista. While infinite intelligence provides a number of important treatments of the opposites, probably the most concentrated and developed of these is the first section in Series 5. Here, Baba enumerates a series of equivalences and their opposites. Light, Prakash, is equivalent to intelligence, knowledge, the everything, the infinite, and Paramatma. Whereas darkness, Andhakar, is equivalent to imagination, ignorance, the nothing, the most finite, and the universe. The items in these series sort individually into pairs. Intelligence is the opposite of imagination, knowledge of ignorance, the everything of the nothing, the infinite of the most finite, and Paramatma of the universe. Though the text does not itself make this point, the list seems to specify basic attributes of God, which through their interaction with their opposites, bring the world into being. Perhaps one could fruitfully compare these attributes and the role that they play with the function of the divine names in the metaphysics of mystical Islam. Asterisk, the idea of attributes so central to Islamic thought occurs several times in the universal prayer, also known as the Master's Prayer, which Meher Baba gave out in 1952 and which remains the most important prayer connected with his advent. Concerning the formless state, this prayer says, "You are without color, without expression, without form, and without attributes." Later, when addressing God as embodied in creation, the prayer reads, "You are the soul of souls, the one with infinite attributes." See the Master's Prayer in The Path of Love, not Monologue. Book reference. So, interesting dilemma here. So it says, not dilemma, what should I say? Contradiction. So you are without color, without expression, without form, and without attributes, says the early lines of Master's Prayer. And towards the end, it says, "You are the soul of souls, the one with infinite attributes." But I still don't understand.
No, that is the two different aspects, Nirakar and Sakar.
And Sakar, yeah. But how does that refer to Islamic thought and the concept of attributes? I do not know.
I do not know.
In Islam,
Mhm.
they make Prophet Muhammad as the prophet, right?
Mhm.
And the God is only Allah, unmanifest form of the God. They
Right.
don't attribute Muhammad as the God. So that's the contradiction. Here, in these two places, it says infinite attributes, and the other place it says it's not. That's our mind. Mind wants some definite answer, but it's beyond our conception. The beyond state of God's, is it consciousness? No. Baba says no. Is it not consciousness? Baba says no. It is not. It's very difficult to, it's not possible for any God realized person to explain about beyond state of God, because they end up explaining beyond state of God. That's what the Baba said. So once we experience, we will know what is beyond state of God. So until then, we have to take it as it is. We only have mind.
Save my number
So
and call me without fail when you get there.
Yes.
We'll all get there one day or other. We will get there.
Oh, no doubt about it. But call me when you get there before me.
We'll have a 32-year-old
No.
Scotch.
The terminology is also like that, beyond.
We'll go to
Yeah.
a park bench. We'll sit. We'll call Baba, make him sit there. Baba, why did you write like this? We'll ask him.
Sure. Yeah, Mama, you were saying something.
The word terminology
Beyond.
used is also even the home point itself is beyond. That is beyond. So don't try to
No.
theorize or imagine all those things. It is
Oh.
beyond your capability as of
Oh.
now.
Mamaji, home
And
point is from
maybe
beyond
also
state
on
of
realization. Yes.
Home point
Correct.
is beyond, Mamaji, beyond. Home point is from beyond state of God, because that is.
So that's what
Yes,
he's
home
saying.
point itself is beyond.
That's what he's saying. Yeah, that's what he's saying. Yeah.
And beyond is you should not think of that right now.
Yeah.
The very usage of the word semantically beyond is what he's pointing out. So don't even attempt,
Yes.
because it's
Mhm.
beyond. Good. Yeah. Okay, let's continue. List of attributes and their opposites as set forth in series 5 does not appear to be complete, nor to have been intended as such. That particular list does not include, for example, the fundamental divine attribute of bliss or Anand, even though the concept of Satchit Anand, existence, knowledge, bliss, receives attention in Sadguru and the light of intelligence as well as in God Speaks. Infinite intelligence never explains what that principle might be which causes these differentiated attributes as primal categories to emerge out of the original infinite formlessness. One important pair of opposites, however, that bears a significant relationship not only to intelligence, imagination, but to the architecture of the cosmos in its division into the subtle and the gross is the opposition between Pran and Akash. Okay, Pran and Akash is what is dealt with in great detail in a book written just a few years after this or around this, which is The Creation and Its Causes, which is not yet out, right?
Yes.
So if
Yes.
anybody listened to those early videos,
I have started the first one. It's
Yeah,
so engrossing.
Absolutely.
It takes a lot of time to absorb.
So
True,
Bart Potts
true.
was
So-
here last few weeks ago. He ran 3 or 4 week sessions reading Creation and Causes, and that book is
Yes.
going to be released in a week or so by Sharia Foundation.
Yeah, and an arm and a leg, and then you can get a book. Yes.
So something we have to read that.
Yes. So the video I shared, I think the group, you may be aware, Ravi, there's a group that's reading it with him online, and there's a bunch of videos on a playlist which I had shared on Telegram. So that's what Mamaji is talking about. So that
Oh,
goes
yes.
through literally page by page. Yeah, he's reading it.
Is
in
that the
detail.
same thing
Yeah.
I'm talking about in?
Yes, I think
Probably.
it is the same thing
Yeah,
as what you are
yeah.
telling.
Yeah, I was going to share that. Yeah, it's a very
Kathy, right?
good.
Kathy is the anchor, right?
No, Cassandra.
Cassandra.
Cassandra, yes, yes. She is the
Cassandra.
one.
Cassandra
Yeah.
is the anchor. Yeah. All right. So one important pair of opposites, however, that bears a significant relationship not only to intelligence imagination, I'm reading again, sorry, bears an important significant relationship not only to intelligence imagination, but to the architecture of the cosmos in its division into the subtle and the gross, is the opposition between Pran and Akash. Pran can be defined as energy. Akash, sometimes defined as space, is really a kind of spaceless space, in that by itself it is inherently nothing, without extension or dimension. The space needed by space, or something like that. That's the way he explains it. What tries to delve into this in greater detail, this concept of Akash, as Baba put it. One could characterize it
Karthik,
as the sea.
Karthik, this
Yeah,
is very
Ravi.
interesting. I used to think, at least, I'm sure all the people think vacuum, the 5 elements, air, space, right? Space is the vacuum. That's what we used to think. But here it says spaceless space.
Less
That's
space,
very interesting thing. Mamaji, what do you
Reference
think?
to
Right?
No,
reference closer
space
to
cannot
vacuum.
be vacuum. Space is an expansion, sort of.
Spaceless space.
Because if
not
it
vacuum.
is vacuum, it absorbs everything. Say what we say, black hole or things like that.
So
But
vacuum has got
that
space,
black
right?
hole itself is present in the space. So that's why space need to be defined as a different entity. Spaceless space. Okay.
Very interesting concept. That
Akash
means beyond our
sometimes defined
conception.
as. Yes.
Hmm.
So actually we have space inside our body. Here the terms are, they ring a nice connection. If you read from, once again, if you read the sentence, one important pair of opposites, however, that bears a significant relationship not only to intelligence, imagination, but to the architecture of the cosmos in its division into subtle and gross, is the opposition between Pran and Akash. Pran can be defined as energy. Akash, sometimes defined as space, is really a kind of spaceless space. In
That's
that, by itself, it is inherently nothing without extension or dimension. So we speak of an Akash or a space inside our body. So it is spaceless space.
I don't
So
know what that
inside
is.
our
What is
body
that?
means it is.
What is that spaceless space?
That is, we have so many organs in our body. No, it is covered by the skin. But we call this as a space inside. So much goes on. Energy is churning there to do everything. So it is sort of a space, but it is a restricted thing. It cannot expand as such inside our body as such.
So if you
But
take
if
an
you
atom,
refer to the
if you take an
Yes.
atom, there's a nucleus and then electrons go around the atom. And there's a space between the electrons in which orbits they're rotating. That is, they call it space, right?
Yes, yes.
What is spaceless space is beyond my imagination.
Yeah, my mind has right now become a vacuum. What all we read is still
Vacuum is still space, right? Vacuum is still space.
Yeah,
Only
but
thing
I'm
is
blank.
it doesn't have anything.
Let me use the simple term. I'm blank right now. So anyway,
Blank,
let's wrap.
That is spaceless. Karthik, you answered the question.
Okay, so let's just wrap up with this para. Again, a reminder, please try to catch up with those videos when you get a chance. It's on Telegram. One could characterize it as the scene or locus of manifestation, the site of potentiality that anything or occurrence presupposes. Before thinking began, Pran and Akash were united. But once thinking began, they split apart, at which point Pran, acting upon Akash, produced the universe. Pran is associated with thinking and further with the subtle sphere. Akash is associated with imagination and the gross sphere. Through their interplay, formlessness acquires infinite form.
Yeah.
Very beautiful, very beautiful. And you can connect very well with what you hear in those videos about that book, right? So yeah, so again, the reference to God Speaks is Satchidanand, pages 84 to 85. So we shall actually stop here. I have a hard stop because I have to head out at 9. I will stop recording, and given we have got a good turnout, we can just talk for a few minutes and then wrap up. So